We're insourcing. This is a different model. I mean, outsourcing is about taking a capability and sending it to someplace where it's going to be done cheaper. You don't consider it to be a core competency that you need to own. And we're doing just the opposite. We're insourcing. In fact, what we're doing is we're putting a turbocharger on this engine, right? And we're turbocharging this engine with thousands and thousands and thousands of people outside. And that's what turbocharged this engine to do this.
Again, the technical leaders of the organization feel rightly entitled to the ownership of the next generation of success in the company. And the new people are concerned about outsourcing. It's not easy to make your way through a corporate culture change.
It's a whole deliberation. It's a whole deliberation. It's the technical, marketing, and general management leadership saying, what are the top 10 problems? And it's difficult. And to this day, as I interact with companies or others, it's always difficult. So, I remember the first time I did this, the top 10, what came back was a top 30 list. And that's not good. There's no choice making in a top 30 list. The second year, 10 came back, but there were 3 in each one of them. So we're still back to 30. And then finally, after really working it into the decision-making process of the business, the strategies of the business, and so on, you begin to zero in on what are the fundamental customer problems, consumer problems we're trying to solve. If we had a top 10 list that we're going to put ourselves against our organization to focus on for the next waves of innovation, what would that be? And it takes a lot of deliberation and inquiry and interaction. It's a lot of meetings to decide on that.
You never start the implementation of a change process like this in its full-fledged version. You start small, prove early results, and then scale, and prove results and scale again.
You never really want to get the investment too far out in front of the actual results, just to maintain good management governance on the implementation of something so important as this. So the scaling approach is key.
What about the trigger point of this process? If problems are usually considered a quintessential element of innovation, then it's around problems where the chain of events should start.
We start with a clear consumer need. We understand that in a deeply profound way. We understand the technology or ways that the problem might be solved. We build a network out there in the world. We will create what we call yellow pages. It's typically about that thick. And we actually will build dossiers and networks that show a whole ecosystem. It might be in the diabetes area or some other area, fertilizers.
An innovator, a thinker, and a doer, Huston enjoys giving details when it comes to turning innovative ideas into cases of innovation practice. Let's see what they did with Pringles, a potato-based snack food that, according to the category marketing team, was not eaten by kids.
멈출 수 없는 즐거움 Pringles.
And someone had the idea of let's print in high fidelity food edible dyes characters on the front and backs of each one of the potato crisps. It may be things from Disney movies, it may be trivia questions, and great idea. The problem is this is nearly $1 billion business, and you make billions and billions of potato crisps, these potato snacks, and it's not easy to do this because you've got to print on these things as they're coming out of frying, high fidelity, and so someone got the idea of, well, can we use an inkjet printer? Now you can imagine. Now, inkjet printers emit soluble dyes, inks, at very high pressure and heat. Well, there's no one has perfected how to do this with food edible dyes, right? No one has done this. So we proceeded to just make thin potato dough and put it through an inkjet printer. And yeah, you could, again, imagine the call to the help desk when that experiment was run by one of our growth entrepreneurs. But put that in and hey, we could print on that. Well, how do we solve this problem? Well, the typical solution would be go to your favorite inkjet printing company and say, can we re-engineer this to gang print billions of potato snacks? And we tried that, and it was very difficult because the problem that you get into is, lawyers on their side and who owns the intellectual property. Well, it's our intellectual property, but we're going to provide insights and so on. And you start to work your way down the path of exclusivity and so on. It takes a long, long time to do these kinds of negotiations. And they're important, so I understand, why. So what we did partway through this process was we wrote a brief. We described the problem that needed to be solved, and we sent it around the world. And we sent it in one network at the time called the Innovation Relay Centers in Europe. And the Innovation Relay Centers pick up the brief, okay, they get it, and they send it off to offices all over Europe. And it ended up in the office of one of their offices in Bologna, Italy. Turns out that in Bologna, Italy was an electrical engineering professor at the University of Bologna who had inherited a family bakery, okay? Now, he liked to dabble with electronics and equipment, and he had perfected how to inkjet, not ink, but it's food safe dyes and everything, onto cakes and cookies. He saw the brief, responded to us. We were able to quickly do a deal with him, scaled it up subsequently, Procter did, with another company, but 8 months later was in the market and drove Procter's business over 10% the very first year.
We must admit that cookies and Pringles potato chips seem less far apart than car painting and SK-II makeup.
This is a makeup that lays down foundation like an airbrush, but it's an electrostatic spray. It's sold in department stores here in the US. It's started in Japan. But that basic technology of doing an airbrush, but with electrostatic, because the skin has one charge, the makeup has a different charge, like two magnets. And if you saw car painting, you realize that they put an electrode on the car and they charge the paint and it just wraps finely around the car. We basically took that concept, put it into the SK-II makeup, and we had a successful innovation from the car paint industry into the makeup industry. And so that's the way it goes. There's hundreds and hundreds of these opportunities.
But how can companies go about an open innovation process like this? Although it may sound as if only players from the world of big Procter & Gamble or multinationals could face it, in fact, its principles are based upon the practices of little companies, because spending money is not their first approach to innovation. They'd rather search for the necessary talent outside and quickly bring in solutions they can monetize in the marketplace. They are entrepreneurs. It's their money. They're very smart about how they leverage their own assets and other people's assets. Rule number 1, keep it simple and focus on the top 10 unmet needs of your customers. Unless you have an appetite for risk and want to think about adjacent opportunities as new growth platforms for your business.
Number 2, translate those needs into problem statements that need to be solved. What are the problems that need to be solved? Number 3, in a simple way, build out your Rolodex. If you just had 500 names of people that are from your ecosystem, because you sit in an ecosystem, if you just had 5, maybe somebody was a salesman and went around to all the suppliers all over the world and knows inside and out the industry. That person's great in your Rolodex. And now keep building that Rolodex, right? And just 500 names. Here's the deal. 500 people gives you access to 1 million. You know how you get there? The average person knows about 2,000 people, okay? 2,000 times 500 is 1 million, okay? The basic is 500 times 2,000 is 1 million. And so in 2 degrees of separation, that person and the people that person knows, you have access to 1 million people. And one of the things that I've learned is that I may go to this person, but 50% of the time my solution is coming from their network. So all I have to do is 2 degrees of separation, and I can reach into a network, a mental network, an asset base of over 1 million people. Look how simple that is. And so that's just a very, very simple approach.
Then, rather than send your people to go and invent something, ask yourself the following questions. Do we have the solution inside? Do we know how to solve it? If not, can we solve this outside? In fact, we should assume that the solution already exists out there. At P&G, they presume that for every in-house scientist, there were at least 200 outside the company who could do similar work. What we fundamentally did was redefine our organization as 1.8 million people, said Huston. We built an unbelievable infrastructure to innovate with other people's ideas. A problem well stated is a problem half solved, especially when you have the whole world to trawl for possible solutions.